Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee, which sits alongside the three area-based planning committees of Dorset Council. Welcome to members of the public who may be joining us also. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Robin Cook, Chairman of the committee. For today's virtual informal meeting, when a decision is required, committee members will express a minded to decision in respect of recommendations set out in officer reports, with decisions being taken under officer delegated authority in the light of the minded to decisions expressed by members in this virtual meeting. I'll now hold a roll call of committee members to ensure that they are in the virtual room. So would you please answer when I call your name? Vice Chairman, Councillor John Worth.
Present, Chairman. Good morning.
Morning. Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Present, Chairman.
Morning, Shane. Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Alex Brenton.
Present, Chair.
Morning, Alex. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Present, Chair.
Good morning, Kelvin. Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Present, Chair.
Hello, Jean. Councillor Mike Dyer.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Present, Chair. Good morning.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Good morning, Chairman. Present.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Good morning. Present.
And Councillor David Took.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. That sounds like a full house to me. We've got plenty of officers involved in today's meeting, and I'll just run through those briefly for you. These in no particular order, by the way. Anna Lee, Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement. Philip Crowther, Legal Business Partner Regulatory. James Weir, Senior Conservation Officer. Matthew Piles, Corporate Director, Economic Growth and Infrastructure. Helen Lilly, Senior Landscape Architect. Simon McFarlane, Area Lead Gillingham. Hannah Massey, Lawyer Regulatory. Naomi Shenkins, Lead Project Officer. Hannah Smith, Development Management Area Manager. Mike Garrity, Head of Planning. Anne Brown, Definitive Map Technical Officer. And Carol Mackay, Senior Definitive Map Technical Officer. Hilary Jordan, Service Manager for Spatial Planning. Reading our representations will be Jill Whitney and Alistair Bevan. Senior Democratic Services Officer today is Elaine Tibble. And behind the scenes producing the meeting are George Dare and Megan Rochester. Welcome to all of you. Moving on to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence, please, Elaine.
Sorry, there are no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Any members, any declaration of interest they wish to make, either now or if it crops up during the further procedure in the meeting, please let us know.
Yes, Chairman. Item 4, the Higher Stockbridge Farm. I did not attend the site meeting, so I won't take part in the discussion or vote.
Councillor Jean Dunseith, thank you for that. I was going to cover that point. Thank you for bringing that. I will be covering that at the start of that item when we get to the substantive item, but thank you for that anyway. Appreciate that. Thank you. Moving on, item 3, public participation. We've had a number of written representations which have been submitted in accordance with the amended speaking protocol for planning committee meetings, and the detail of that's included with the agenda papers. These are going to be read out by officers not involved in the applications, and we'll take them in the following order: the objectors, the supporters, the parish and town councils, applicants and agents, plus any Dorset councillors who may choose to speak first or last. If we move on now to the substantive items on the agenda, just before we start, item 5, which is the application for the registration of a town or village green at Happy Island, Bridport. This application has been deferred to a later date due to an unexpected circumstances concerning the case officer. So we'll be looking at that at the earliest date that we can in the future. So item 5 is withdrawn or deferred today. On the other items, the background information relating to the applications has been available to members prior to this meeting. These are covering consultations, objections and representations, together with the council's related policies. The procedure we're going to follow with these is I'll invite the case officer to introduce their item. We'll then hear the written submissions, and these will be read out by the planning officers who have not dealt with the applications. Following the public participation section of each item, I will ask officers if there are any salient points they wish to clarify. I'll then ask members if they have any questions of clarification to ensure that everyone has had the opportunity to comment, and then we'll move into the debate. Can I request that members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through the chair, and I'll invite members to speak in turn. Please keep microphones on mute and camera off when not speaking, which will help to maintain audio and video quality. At the end of the debate, for transparency, I will take the minded to vote by a roll call. The delegated officer will then make the formal decision. First item on the agenda is item 4, is WD/D/19/003181, land at Higher Stockbridge Farm, Stockbridge. Now, members, or most of the members here will know we all took part in the site visit last Thursday morning, and 9 of us out of the 12 of us were able to attend, but 3 members were not. And you've already heard from Councillor Dunseith, but just for clarity in the meeting, what I'm going to do is go to each member in turn and to say if they feel that they can or cannot take part in the debate and decision making, and if they can, how they are familiar with the site. So I'll just come to you, each of you in turn, if you just clarify your situation with regard to this item. So Councillor Dunseith, I know we've heard from you already, but would you just confirm?
Yes, Chairman. I was not at the site visit, so don't have all the information that you have, so will not be taking part, nor voting.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mike Dyer.
I wasn't able to attend either, Chairman, so I won't be taking part in the decision.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Councillor Dyer. And Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Similarly, Chair, I was not able to attend the site visit because it clashed with another meeting. So in line with our protocol on site visits, I will not be participating in the meeting, and I will not be voting. Thank you very much.
Fine, thank you very much. That just clarifies that. And again, just for clarification, the members that did attend are myself, obviously, Councillor Worth, Councillor Bartlett, Councillor Bolwell, Councillor Brenton, Councillor Clayton, Councillor Penfold, Councillor Rideout and Councillor Took. Councillor Penfold is the ward member in respect of this application. And could I ask you, Councillor Penfold, do you wish to make a representation as ward member on this item, or do you want to continue to take part in the debate and vote in your capacity as a committee member? Could you please clarify?
Yes, I would like to take part as a committee member, please, Chairman.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the presentation, and that's going to be made today by Simon McFarlane. So Simon, when you're ready, I presume you want to have a shared screen with us, so I'll pass it to you to get set up as and when you're ready. Okay, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just get my presentation up.
Mary, can you turn your video off, please?
Sorry.
Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, thank you. Yep, quite
Good.
clear.
Okay, so this is a full application for the installation of a renewable energy scheme comprising ground-mounted photovoltaic solar arrays, together with a substation, transformer stations, access, internal access track, landscaping, biodiversity measures, security fencing, security measures, access gate, access improvements and ancillary infrastructure. So this is the sort of wider context location plan. The site is located here by Higher Stockbridge Farm. See Sherborne to the north and Yeovil to the northwest of the site, largely in an area of sort of undeveloped agricultural land. This is the red line boundary of the site. You'll see the access comes off from this lane here through High Stockbridge Farm. The red line is the application site, and which you can see is fairly extensive, covering approximately 80 hectares. And the blue line, which comes all the way down to Bailey Ridge Lane, is also land within the applicant's ownership. Excuse the slight crudeness of this plan. This was just really cobbled together just to indicate roughly where the red line is in the context of the land, and you can see again that this is largely all agricultural land with hedgerows and planting, no buildings on site. This is the red line application boundary in the context of the constraints plan. You can see that it's white land, it's undesignated land, not for any particular purpose. It's not within the area of outstanding natural beauty. It does have footpaths, which you can see are the green dotted lines that pass through the site to the south, pass through to the west, and there's various footpaths sort of further afield to the northwest and to the northeast, which will be afforded varying differing views of the site. To the west there's an ancient woodland which is fairly close by, and to the north is also a designated ancient woodland. The little red triangles that you see here are listed buildings. We have a grade 1 listed building as the blue dot here, and there's some listed buildings just to the east of the site at Higher Stockbridge Farm. You'll notice that the site doesn't fall within any floodplains or critical drainage areas. And in terms of the use of the land, as I stated, it's agricultural land at the moment. 39% of the site is deemed to be grade 4 agricultural land, and 61% of the site is deemed to be subgrade 3B agricultural land. So this isn't considered to be the best and the most versatile agricultural land. Just going to run through a few photographs of the site. There's probably 4 or 5 photographs. It's a big site, so we've just stuck to the key views and some of the views that we visited at the site visit last week. This is the site from Bailey Ridge Lane, which sits to the south of the site, looking to the north. The site at this point is fairly flat in terms of its topography, so you probably wouldn't be afforded very extensive views of the solar panels at this particular point, particularly as well because there is also screening. This is a view from a public road to the northwest of the site. This area here is the Stockbridge Farm in the far distance, so the site really falls within this area here. Again, only probably limited views from this particular area due to the intervening vegetation. However, the view opens up a bit further up this road again to the northwest of the site. This is, if you remember, the point where we stopped and had a look. So you get a very clear view of this sort of undeveloped rolling agricultural landscape. We've got Stockbridge Farm over here to the left, and Homebushes Farm is sort of around about here. This is the 2 red arrows are approximately the extent of the length of the site. About 1.4 kilometres, so you can see it is quite an extensive area. From this view you will get views of the panels within these fields. All of these trees will remain, so it will be sort of scattered in between. This view up here is to the north of the site and slightly to the south of Lewiston School compound, and just adjacent to the ancient woodland. This is the higher Stockbridge farm compound down here, and so the majority of the site will fall in this area here. So again, glimpsed views of the panels sitting within the trees from this elevated position, and also some panels just over this ridge and down the hill slightly. So the scheme, when it was first submitted, is on the left-hand side of your screen. As a result of correspondence with case officers and concerns that were raised due to landscape, heritage impacts and matters such as those, the applicants agreed to reduce the scheme, which is shown on your right. So there's been an overall 20% reduction in the space. You can see that some panels that were here on the original scheme have been removed in this area, and some panels removed adjacent to Bailey Ridge Lane. And there's also a suite of panels that have been moved back in this area here. So yeah, a fairly significant reduction, although not quite a reduction enough in the overall context. You'll see here to the centre of the site, we've got the ancillary sort of infrastructure. We've got substation enclosure, which I'll come on to in a slide or two. So the overall size and dimensions of the scheme, so width-wise, around about the widest point, just shy of 800 metres, with a top-to-bottom distance of about 1,400 metres and a total site area of approximately 80 hectares, a fairly significant size. This shows the typical mounting structure and panels. So roughly about just over a 3 metre gap in between panels, and a maximum height of around about 2.75 metres, all facing south. And here is a sort of front-on elevation, sorry, rear elevation. So around the sort of top centre of the site and to the west of High Stockbridge Farm, this is the sort of main heart of the site, if you like. This is the substation details where the connection will be made to the power lines and to the grid. These are the elevations of what that plan looks like. And again, within this same compound, there's a transformer station, about 9.9 metres in length and just over 2 metres in width. There's a control house with a satellite dish. And then around the site at various points, you'll have security system poles with CCTV cameras, and also meteo stations mounted on metal poles. There'll be security fencing erected around the perimeter of the site. This indicates that there will be space for small mammals to go in and out of the site. So now we'll get on to the key planning issues, the principal impact on residential amenity, any impact on trees, biodiversity, and really the main areas of concern for the council in this case are the heritage assets and the visual amenity and landscape, and then the overall planning balance. So in principle, National Planning Policy Framework says that there's not a requirement for applicants to demonstrate the overall need for renewable or low carbon energy. Council recognises, particularly in its acknowledgement of the climate crisis, that there is a need for renewable energy and low carbon energy, so that's totally agreed, not in contention. However, point B says that local authorities should approve applications, but only if its impacts are or can be made acceptable. So that's the key point, which we'll get onto next. So in terms of impact on residential amenity, people who live nearby, first point to make really is that there's not actually a lot of people that live too close to the site. We have residential dwellings up at Stockbridge Farm, and then down here at Homebushes Farm, and then some residential properties to the south of Bailey Ridge Lane. So although there'll be a change visually to the landscape and some visual impact, overall impact on residential amenity would be considered to be acceptable and not so harmful to warrant the refusal of the planning application. So next two slides are really part of the planning balance for this site and things to be taken into consideration favourably. So you'll see on the right hand picture agricultural fields with plenty of tree planting. So there's 179 trees on this site of varying quality, really sort of quite a nice landscape. Only 3 of those trees, which are moderate quality, and a small section of hedgerow are required for removal to facilitate the development. However, 1,523 metres of new hedgerow is proposed, and an area of 4,125 metres squared of native woodland is also proposed, and that's a total of 470 new individual trees. So that's a significant benefit which should be given some weight in the planning balance. Another key consideration, biodiversity. Although this is the loss of fields for something that could be considered slightly more industrial in nature, there is actually quite a significant biodiversity uplift as part of this proposal. The plan here on the right is the Biodiversity Mitigation and Enhancement Plan. So areas covered in blue would be fields that are subject to some conservation grazing, i.e. no grazing during summer months. We've got shade-loving woodland plants sown under panels in this area. The yellow indicates ground nesting bird habitat. These green sections here and here are the new native woodland planting with a significant amount of trees, and we've got new hedgerow planting in certain areas around the site. We've also got where the stars are located, hibbernaculars, which are these things here for insects and reptiles. We've got swathes of bird boxes and bat boxes as well, and overall there's probably a 64.29% increase in biodiversity, so another matter weighing in favour of the scheme. However, where the local authorities' concerns lie are predominantly heritage assets and landscape impact. So we'll start with heritage assets and just remind members of sort of our duties with respect to those. So under Section 66 of the Planning and Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act, considering whether to grant permission for development which affects a listed building, we must have special regard to the desirability of preserving that building or its setting, or any features of architectural or historic interest it possesses. So that special regard is what we need to be mindful of. And the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 199, says that when considering the impact of a proposed development on the significance of a designated heritage asset, in this case listed buildings, great weight should be given to that asset's conservation, and the more important the asset, the greater the weight should be, irrespective of what level of harm is considered to be occurred. And then paragraph 202, where the development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm, that the significance of that asset, the harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. So that's the context in which we are going to be having a look at now. So in terms of the heritage assets, The red stars indicate where the main assets lie, which are considered to be impacted by this proposal. Here we have Stockbridge, Lower Stockbridge Barn. We have a grade 2 star building and a farmhouse, which is grade 2. To the north of the site, we have cumulative elements within the Italian garden to the southwest of Lewison School. Up here we have an old water tower, grade 2, and here we have the St Anthony's Convent, Lewison School, grade 2 star. All of these assets are considered to be negatively affected to the degree that they will suffer less than substantial harm by the change in the nature of the landscape from a tranquil sort of rural agricultural land, which has associations with these assets, to the more sort of industrial type of solar farm that's proposed. So St Anthony's Convent School, located to the north of the site, would be impacted. One area in particular, the association with the land, you see on this historic map, this view through the woodland, which was designed to look out onto the sort of rolling valley down here, and which still exists to some extent today. If you remember, members, we stood around this location where you do get that view of the undeveloped rural landscape. These are the heritage assets at Lower Stockbridge Farm. You've got the barn at grade 2 star on the left here, and the farmhouse on the right, which are considered to be negatively affected by virtue of less than substantial harm. And a cumulative arrangement of heritage assets within the Italian garden to the southwest of the school. And the water tower, which is also within the context of the site and is considered to be a negatively impact through its association and the setting. And then in terms of visual amenity and landscape, so as touched on earlier, there's a variety of footpaths and bridleways that surround the site. We have a bridleway that goes through the middle of the site and footpaths to the northwest, the northeast, and various footpaths to the south. So this site will be viewed by members of the public on their walks in the countryside. So one of the main concerns, and probably the main concern, is the impact on the landscape in connection with the association with the heritage assets. This area is considered to be a valued landscape. It's noted as the Blackmore Vale and Vale of Wardour in the National Character Area Profile. This image here is a typical view of this type of landscape, which is strongly pastoral, hedged with numerous hedgerows and trees, which is very similar to what we've seen on this site. And 73% of this national character area remains undisturbed by any urban development, any noise or traffic, or any other sources of visual or auditory intrusion. And what we've got on the site, the proposal is proposed on it, is a landscape that's very typical. It is undeveloped, tranquil rural landscape, and one of the objectives of these landscapes is to keep them like that, which is where the main concern lies with this proposal. So overall planning balance and the public benefits, there's no objection with regard to the principle, the residential amenity, highways, flooding, trees, biodiversity, all subject to condition. And it's acknowledged that there are economic benefits that would be achieved during construction phases. There will be significant environmental benefits with a biodiversity net gain, significant proposed tree and hedge planting, 35 megawatts of renewable energy, enough to power 10,605 homes per year, with a CO2 displacement of 11,610 tonnes per annum and a displacement of 406 tonnes over its lifespan of 35 years. So significant things to weigh in the balance. However, where the balance is felt to be tipped in this case is the cumulative harm to heritage assets,
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you for that. Okay, now somebody's got their mic on. That's better. I had feedback. We've got speaker list of representations, and I think it's Jill Whitney is going to read these representations for us. So Jill, are you ready, or when you're ready, do you want to start your presentation? Okay.
Morning, Chair.
Morning.
Okay, we have the first objection from Mr. Michael Gates. The proposed development covers a considerable area of small fields in one of the few unspoilt Dorset clay vales. This valley runs south from the small village of Lillington in a landscape of considerable beauty that is virtually unchanged since Thomas Hardy's time, providing a marvellous setting for a number of heritage assets, including the Grade 1 church in Lillington. My family have lived at Holmbushes Farm, set just south of the development, for nearly 30 years. We have loved exploring the footpaths and bridleways in the vicinity with their stunning views over the vale, west towards Wynyards Gap and south to the Backham Ridge in the Dorset AONB. We watch other walkers and equestrians on nearby bridleway and footpaths also taking enjoyment from the landscape. The development would cover a significant area of the valley floor and would be visible from many rights of way around and across the proposed site, including the Macmillan Way. The proposed tree planting to screen the development is quite inadequate to shield it from users of the bridleway next to our house, and it would also be visible a very short distance away from our home and a number of our rooms. We are concerned that the proposed development will blight this attractive landscape for future generations. How confident can we be that Votalia and any future owners will be willing or even able to reinstate the land to its present condition? The benefits of the proposal are outweighed by the adverse impact this would have on the landscape, heritage assets and amenity values of the area. We believe the proposal should be rejected as it fails to meet a number of Dorset planning policies. And now we have an objection from Mr. Pinney of Knights plc. This is the wrong time to approve this application when technology and policy are changing rapidly. With 5 amendments to the application since 2019, and despite public rebuttals and corrections, the application still contains contradictions and errors on size, value, visibility, tourism and management practices. The applicant's capability to plan and deliver such a large project effectively and sympathetically is in doubt. Votalia is untrustworthy. Its responses to public concerns are disingenuous. It denies risks of contamination on decommissioning, defies Ofwat on predicted rainfall figures and potential for flooding, claims to restore the area to farmland. There is no contingency or risk planning and it has no experience of site restoration. There are no pledges, covenants or guarantees to prevent Votalia causing downstream floods and leaving a contaminated brownfield site to DCC. Votalia's application is based upon obsolete policy. The country's current emphasis is more on the preservation of land as carbon sinks in their natural environment than generating solar power. At point 9 of the government's 10-point plan published on the 19th of the 10th, 2021, the PM states, "We will safeguard our cherished landscapes, protect our natural environment, safeguarding these areas for future generations, protecting and improving 30% of UK land by 2030. Energy and Climate Minister Greg Hands said a £500 million package of support at COP26 will help protect millions of hectares of land, boosting rural communities. Chris Loder, our MP, has declared his hope this application is rejected to prevent the desecration of a part of cultural and historic fabric of Dorset. Support for solar has reduced since 2016 when the government cut subsidies for renewable UK energy projects until 2025. Considered in isolation, the merits of this application are unconvincing, taken in conjunction with the damaging to our local cultural heritage. No effort has been made in some other 9 sites in the locality. This application is the largest, most visible and most areas of greatest consumption. No solar panels appear on any new roofs in the 400-acre development in Poundbury or Thornford, Yetminster and Sherborne. Solar energy is seasonal, contributing only 4% of UK's total, less than wind and biomass. The committee must reconcile the perceived gains against the risks, detriments and lost cultural heritage. Given the lack of confidence in Votalia delivering a beneficial long-term gain, the changes in policy and priority and imbalance of benefits between rural Dorset being the provider of ethical power for urban consumers, the committee should refuse the application. Not to do so would be condemning 147 acres to environmental uncertainty in the hands of outsiders with little or no accountability to those in, local to or visiting Wessex. And now we have an objection from Mark Ashley Miller. This industrial solar park will have a significant detrimental impact on land designated as ancient farmland with specific historical character. The harmful effects of building the park are enhanced due to its size and valley location. They will far outweigh the benefits of producing solar power. There are many more sites of industrial or post-industrial land within a few miles of Higher Stockbridge Farm, which are more fitting for renewable energy developments. If approved, the Dorset Council would be responsible for trashing the beautiful local environment, and this is not what people who you represent wish for. Please oppose this application. And now we have support representations. Support from Peter Roberts. I passionately support this application as the recent COP26 highlighted we are in international battle to safeguard the world we live in for future generations. This development will play a part in this journey and it is crucial that we support it. The application is detailed and has been ongoing for a significant period of time and no doubt cost to the developer. The statement of community involvement clearly shows how they have listened and adapted based on constructive input from the community. I am expecting to become a father for the first time in early 2022. I would be proud to show my child how we as a local community are engaging in the climate crisis positively and dealing with the inconveniences this causes. And now we have a representative from Camvale Parish Council. Camvale Parish Council comprises the 4 separate parishes of Longburton, Lillington, Lewiston and Holnest. Parish councillors have consulted their parishioners and as a result, the majority of the councillors have voted to support local opposition and to reiterate our strong objection to the scheme, which is huge by any standards and will dominate this beautiful vale. We support Dorset Council's policy of seeking practical ways to combat climate change and broadly support the government's policies of expanding the use of renewable energy per se. However, any measures must be proportionate and must be balanced against potential harm to the countryside. We believe that the application should be refused on the following grounds. The proposed site of the solar farm is on the north-facing slope in a landscape of small fields, ancient hedgerows, copses, farms and small villages. There is nothing in the area approaching this huge scale, such that the solar farm would completely dominate the surrounding countryside. The proposed site is overlooked by the Macmillan Way, bridleways, footpaths, part of the Bailey Ridge Hill, Backham and Lillington, where owners of listed buildings are themselves constrained by planning regulations. While it would barely impact upon the applicant's visual amenity, the solar farm would have a serious impact on specific properties, including Holmbushes Farm, Lower Bailey Ridge Farm and holiday cottages, and the Grade 1 listed Lillington Church. Our parishioners expressed concern about excessive construction and maintenance traffic along local minor roads and an increased flood risk. With proposed operational lifetime of 35 years, this development cannot be considered temporary. We think it unlikely that the site would ever return to agricultural use, more likely to be refurbished as a solar farm or become a derelict brownfield site. Because we are limited to only 450 words on this occasion, CVPC will not reiterate the many points where this application does not satisfy Dorset Council local plan policies, as we explained in our previous submission. Suffice to say that these include COM 11, EMV 10 and the landscape and townscape setting, EMV 1, landscape, seascape and sites of geological interest, EMV 16, amenity, ENV 4, heritage assets. In summary, while CPVC supports any reasonable measures to address climate change on this occasion, we strongly object to this proposal. The proposed development will be of such huge scale that it will seriously adversely affect the surrounding countryside, the setting of heritage assets, and the amenity value of part of the Blackmore Vale. We therefore request that the Strategic Planning Committee does not support this application. And now my apologies, I will continue with the support comments. This is the support from Gareth Roberts of the Pegasus Group. I represent the applicants Voltalia UK Limited on planning matters. Having reviewed the committee report, I make the following points over the scheme's planning merits and balance. The proposal is for the 35 milliwatt ground mounted solar equating to the annual energy consumption of 10,605 households and an annual CO2 displacement of 20,000 tonnes. This should carry significant weight as required by national policy. The proposal is wholly consistent with the government's policies in meeting the challenge of climate change and energy security. As with Voltalia's scheme at Spetsbury, local businesses will be contracted for labour, materials, etc. The local landscape's capacity to accommodate a larger solar park is established through Decision Notice WD D15001841, which expired in 2019. The unimplemented permission was located 1 kilometre south of Higher Stockbridge. The site is located within an undesignated countryside and doesn't form the setting to the AONB. It forms on the lowest tier in the hierarchy introduced by NPPF Para 175. The local landscape is not covered by any non-statutory landscape designation. The scheme was reduced in its physical footprint as part of the iterative design process, omitting parts of the site that were judged to be more visible. Any landscape character or visual effects would be localised and largely limited to the immediate environs. Some community respondents withdrew their objection following reconsultation. Heritage. A review has been made by a second heritage consultant at Pegasus Group, informed by site visits to the listed Lower Stockbridge Barn and Farmhouse, St Anthony's Convent and associated elements in the Italian Gardens. The proposals would not be visible from these assets, nor co-visible in views where their significance can be appreciated. Any views from the water tower, which has solar panels within its grounds, will be distant and partially screened by vegetation. The positioning of the scheme in the wider surrounds of these heritage assets will not harm their heritage significance through changes in setting. The scheme accords with all heritage law, policy and guidance. Other matters. It is enough for the proposal to accord with the development plan as a whole. It does not have to accord with each policy therein. Officer's report confirms development is acceptable for biodiversity, highway safety, PROW, drainage, archaeology and residential amenity. It also occupies poor quality agricultural land. The connection point to the electricity grid within the application site, thus no grid connection, disruption to the local community. There are no brownfield sites available for the development. Development provides significant biodiversity net gain. It will add to the organic matter in the soil and assist in alleviating climate change and flooding. Any further delay in delivering renewables would only mean more radical intervention in the future. Yours sincerely. And now we have a statement from Kelly Clutterbuck, UK Development Manager for Voltalia. The solar development at Higher Stockbridge supports the transition to a low carbon future as part of an international effort to combat climate change and will provide a decentralised, clean, renewable and sustainable form of electricity generation. The benefits brought by the anticipated CO2 displacement of the project, plus biodiversity enhancements and regional economic benefits are significant. Voltalia UK is committed to working with and supporting the local community following 2 delegated approvals in South Dorset Farm and Clifton Farm, Voltalia has proven this commitment by funding and completing improvements at Spetsbury Primary School, provided funding for parish council initiatives, and is continuing to engage with the community at the South Farm site. The committee report states that detailed landscape and conservation advice was not sought. This statement is incorrect. The pre-application advice was issued following a site visit undertaken by the council's case officer and the council's former specialist service team leader, a qualified landscape architect. To summarise, the council considered that the layout of the proposed site, the surrounding landform and topography would make it a favourable location for solar. The submitted design and access statement identifies how the initial scheme was reduced prior to submission to reflect pre-application and community consultation advice. The pre-application advice was based on a larger scheme in comparison to the layout that is being presented to the strategy committee, and the development footprint has further reduced by 20% during this determination period. A key requirement with renewable energy development is identifying an electrical network with sufficient capacity to accommodate the exported power, and it is for this reason that developments are driven to specific geographical areas. Voltalia has reduced the scheme as far as practicable. Given the recent announcements at COP26 and current climate change emergency, the need for new renewable energy is even more pressing. The climate and ecological emergency strategy published by Dorset Council in July 2020 identifies how Dorset needs to play its part by generating 100% of its own energy demand, and projects that Dorset will need around 4 gigawatts of solar generation. The target represents a significant local challenge and emphasis on the significant weight that should be placed in favour of this development. It is notable that Dorset did not achieve its own 2020 target of providing 7.5% of total energy from renewables. There was a shortfall of around 292 gigawatts. This project is strategically important for Dorset. Thank you.
And very well done, Jill. There was a lot to get through there, and thank you very much for that. And absolutely the right order too. You no need to put that apology in, because you read them in exactly the order they were meant to be. So thank you for that. Okay, right. Now, as I said, there was a lot there to take in. Simon, are there any points that you want to respond to, need to respond to at this stage?
No, I don't think there are. Chair, I'll wait for any members' questions.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. And next, then, member questions. Members, any questions for clarity? I haven't got anybody on the screen at the moment. Yeah, David Took. You're on mute, David.
Not the last time that'll be said this year, I'm sure. Apologies. This seems to be a scheme which is, to my mind, balanced on a knife edge. It's all down to what is harm versus the climate emergency, which we as Dorset Council declared in our very first ever meeting as a council. And I think there's a great deal of weight applies to that climate emergency, or climate and ecological emergency, and the biodiversity enhancements here I think is significant. And it comes down to what do we mean by significant harm or less than significant harm. And this is something I struggle with, because it seems to be a very much a personal decision based subjectively by people as to what. I'm not aware of any objective criteria, but if officers could point me towards that, I'd be grateful.
Okay, anybody come back to David Took on that one?
Hi, David. Simon here. I mean, the context of the heritage harm, the statutory duty and the advice in the MPPF is that, irrespective of the harm, that designated heritage assets should be given great weight, and we should have that special regard to them. I think less than substantial shouldn't be confused as sort of, not important. It's given great importance in this decision-making process, and coupled with the landscape harm, it's been given such importance that it has on this case, in our opinion. And you're right that at the end of the day, it is fairly subjective. That has tipped the balance against those very significant benefits that this site will bring with the renewable energy and the other things. So it has been given serious consideration, and overall it was just felt that this site in this particular location was enough to, that those harms were enough to outweigh those benefits, even in the context that those benefits are significant.
All right, but that was a subjective feeling by the officers who were doing the examination.
At the end of the day, yes, it's fairly subjective, but it's based, it's based on professional officers' experience in the context of legislation and other appeal decisions and other cases that we've all dealt with previously.
So, if we did refuse this, you'll be quite confident at appeal.
I think if the council ever makes a decision, it has to have some level of confidence that it can defend its decision at appeal. So the answer to that is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I had trouble getting the camera and the microphone on. Thank you for the officer's report. Really good report, and I agree a lot of what Councillor Took said. This business of it being on a knife edge, and really it comes down to an individual's perspective to a large degree as to whether this is a development that should or shouldn't go ahead. Could I just ask, in terms of the farms, a lot has been made of the grade 2 listed status of the buildings on the farm. Could I just ask, are there other more modern structures alongside those buildings or within line of sight of them that would cause harm of some description, whether significant or otherwise, to those listed buildings? Is that how those farms have developed? Do they have modern agricultural buildings alongside those heritage assets?
Yeah, there will be buildings that are within the curtilages of those original buildings that are more modern, but what they will be is predominantly associated with agriculture, and they'll be of a scale that's commensurate with those buildings and the area that they're located.
Could I come back, Chairman?
Yes. Okay. Yep. Please.
So if you were standing at obviously when we did the site visit, we were from some distance from it and we didn't actually get close to those farms. So just want to ask the question, if you were standing at that grade 2 listed barn, how visible would the solar farm be from where you would be? Would it be blocked by hedging? Would you actually see it? How close proximity would you feel that solar farm is to those grade 2 listed buildings?
I mean, the proximity, they are fairly close. I don't know if you can see, if I can go back to the presentation on a different slide, and just bear with me one. This might be the best slide to to view. I mean, Stockbridge Farm is here, which is the grade 2 star and grade 2 listed buildings, and then the site is fairly close, I would say, to the west. In terms of intervisibility, it's never been the council's case that the harm is through the direct intervisibility between the heritage assets and the solar farm. It's acknowledged that there will be limited views to lots of these assets. It's more the nature of the land. These heritage assets are associated with agricultural, rural, tranquil grounds, and that's the change in their setting, is that agricultural, rural, tranquil area will be transformed into a very vast solar farm at nearly 1.4 kilometres in length, which significantly changes the setting, which is where the harm arises. So it's not the intervisibility as such.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Shane, thank you. Mary Penfold.
Thank you, Chairman. A point of clarification to legal, really. I did actually attend the Parish Council meeting when this application was discussed, but I obviously took no part in it. So I presume that doesn't preclude me from speaking at this meeting.
I would say it probably doesn't exclude you. I don't know whether Phil Crowther wants just to firm up on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Penfold. No, simply attending and observing would not mean that you're prohibited from taking part.
Thank you very much. I did ask the clerk to note that I didn't speak on the item anyway. Thank you. Could I ask another question, Chairman, very briefly? The acreage of this site, is it 184?
Hi, Mary. I've been working in hectares. I was around approximately 80 hectares. So that in acres, I'd have to do a quick calculation. Can I come back to you on that?
Yes, absolutely fine. I got it from somewhere, and I think we probably were told this on the site visit, but I wanted to check because obviously looking at it, it's large. Thank you very much, Chairman.
No, that's fine. That's a sort of query that some of us have a tendency to raise. We're still perhaps picturing acres. We know if you tell us what an acre is, we can picture that immediately. Hectares is slightly different, but I'm sure Simon will give us the chapter and verse on that.
It's sorry, 197 acres.
There you go, 197 acres. Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Is that all, Mary? Is that your question? You're on
yes,
mute.
That's fine. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Right, next on the list is Councillor John Worth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you to the officer for the report. It's very, very comprehensive. I found our site visit last week was very useful to bring it all into context and for us to see the real lay of the land, the layout. But I'm really conflicted on this one because I look at the climate emergency that we've declared, the fact that we know that power generation in Dorset is at a level not sufficient for economic growth, and that is one of the things that we're really focused on as well. So I find this, like others have said, on a knife edge, because whilst it's, you know, could be seen as a blot on the landscape because of the vast scale of it, it's also something that I feel we should be positively looking at because we need the power these solar farms are going to generate. The reason why they place solar farms where they place them is their proximity to the pylons and a way of getting the electricity away, and people say, oh well, there's a much better site down the road that wouldn't be overlooked, but it's probably nowhere near any of the pylons, so you can't put a substation in and feed it to the grid. So I'm still not sure on this one, but I think there are compelling arguments both ways, and we need to, at the end of the day, we'll have to weigh it up on the balance of that compulsion, whether the need for power and that as the right location because of the infrastructure, or it's an area that shouldn't have a development. But at the moment, I'm still really undecided on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I take that as a comment rather than a question then.
Yeah, I did say it was a non-technical, but it was going to be a comment.
You did indeed. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Point well made. Thanks. Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Chairman, mine is a comment. I don't know if the other speakers have questions before.
I think we're well into the discussion anyway, so if you'd like to go ahead, Belinda, and
Right,
your comment will be
camera
welcome. Thank you.
Just a moment. Thank you, Chairman. Right, well, since I saw this application come in, I've had a real tug-of-war battle going on in my head because I sit on the Climate and Ecological Emergency Panel. And as others have referred to, I think this is on a knife edge. I've obviously read the report, I've read all the comments by the public, and I've seen the application site from 2 views or more. Weighing up the balance, of course, I'm in support of green alternatives to energy, of course I am, but it has to be in the right place. And on balance, I do not feel this is in the right place, and it's contrary to local plan policy. Of course, I welcome I think it was 470 additional tree plantings, and the biodiversity gains are welcomed, but I think these could be made even without the solar farm in place. And going back to the proposal, its location and appearance scale, I think, would significantly harm the character of what is a quality and a valued landscape in the Blackmore Vale character area and the Vale of Warder National Character Area. So weighing it up in the planning balance, in my opinion, the public benefits do not outweigh what I think is the cumulative harm to the character and value of a character and value landscape, and the setting and design of designated and undesignated heritage assets to what amounts actually to half a lifetime, 35 years. Plus, of course, the loss of the recreational value in a very pastoral landscape. So for the reasons I've just stated, I'm minded to support refusal of the application. Thank you.
Okay, well, I've got several members still waiting to ask questions as well. So you've made that proposal. Do we have a seconder? Before I go on to these, do we have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, I'll second it. Mary Penfold. Mary Penfold.
Mary Penfold. Okay, well, I'm going to hold it there because I'm going to go on to the next person with a question here is Alex Brenton.
So,
Alex.
Chairman, sorry, it's Phil Crowther, and apologies for being a pedant, but
right.
I think Councillor Rideout said that she would support refusal rather than actually proposing refusal. So I think just worth clarifying with Councillor Rideout whether she meant to make a proposal or not.
Thank you very much. That's extremely important, and thank you for that, Phil. Belinda?
Yes, Chairman, I did say to support a minded to refusal of the application.
Okay, I'll take that. And Mary Penfold?
Yes, I'll agree. I agree. Thank you, Chairman.
You're seconding?
Yes, definitely.
Happy with that, Phil?
Yes, I think so, Chairman. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, but thank you for pointing that out. Okay, but I'll put that on a holding position for the moment because I've got Alex Brenton waiting to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. A question to the officers, really. I've been looking at the sort of planning considerations the Dorset AONB lists up, and it goes on about conserving the sense of rural tranquility, and there's a bit here where it's very good on limiting horses and camping and such like, and also mentions noise and light pollution. Now, this obviously will have, this site, if it goes ahead, will obviously have deer fencing around it and 3-meter poles with lights on. Are these only, movement activated lights, or are they going to be on all night? Because this sort of area also has what we class as dark skies. That none of these villages are going to have street lights. There's not going to be any floodlights on all the time. So will we actually have, you know, will this site, if it goes forward, produce an element of lights at night, which could cause what you might call light pollution? That's just a question. Will they be on all night, or only during work hours?
Okay, good point. Simon, do you have an update on that, please?
I very much doubt that there'd be if any, lights on at night at this site, and there's probably very few reasons to have lights. But what we could do, if councillors were minded to approve an application like this, there would be a planning condition which could sort of seek the detail of the lighting scheme, and there could be stipulations that lights weren't to be on at night time, or if they were and they had to be, that they're under a certain level and quite low luminescence.
Does that answer your question, Alex?
Thank you. I mean, if I would like to go forward with that, if we do, what's the word, accept the proposal, please could we have conditions limiting so that LED lights pointed at ground level, not up into the sky? That sort of condition, like they have in many places now on working areas. I'm quite keen on that.
Okay, the point has been noted. Okay, thank you. Thank you
that
very
was
much.
The question. I'll talk later if I'm allowed to.
Okay. Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I've still got about another 3 or 4 questions, but you've got others that still wish to speak in the chat bar. So if I could do 2 of those, would that be okay, Chairman?
Well, yes. Okay. If you want to got 2, I've got 1 other person now waiting, which is Councillor Clayton. So I'm sure he won't mind if you want to get your questions in and out of the way, and we can move on. Okay.
Yeah. I'll do 2 and come back afterwards if you allow me after he's spoken.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, officers. There's 179 trees on the site, and only 3 trees to be removed. I just wonder how much assurance that we can have that it will only be those 3 trees that are removed. These are large trees that obviously help with in terms of getting rid of carbon. We've listened time and time again about these types of things. And what I've got a little bit of concern around is that we see these planning applications come before us, and there tends to be a tendency, and I'm not saying it will happen on this site, but in the past we've seen a tendency that there seems to be a greater removal of mature trees than we originally envisaged. And I just wonder how much insurance we're going to have that only if this was to be accepted, this application, that only those 3 trees would be removed. I know that the applicants seem to be of a mind to put in a lot more hedgerows and plant a lot more trees. Yeah, 470 new individual trees, as you've just put up on screen very helpfully, which is great. I just wondered, in terms of those mature trees, what assurance have we got that we're only going to lose those 3, please?
Hi, Councillor Bartlett. Well, again, if the application was approved, there would be a planning condition or the 2 planning conditions which sought details of tree protection and management. And in fact, there's already tree protection and management documents submitted with the planning application, and so they would be conditioned, and the development would have to be carried out in accordance with those documents. I really don't think there can be any concern at all with the removal of only 3 small moderate quality trees in the context of 470 new individual trees. So I think councillors could be fairly confident on the tree front in particular.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, we've noted that one as well. Thank you. Yeah.
It was obviously that in terms of mature trees, obviously they do a better job of clearing the carbon out of the atmosphere rather than those younger trees. And of course, the trees take a long time to mature. Go back with another question, please, Chairman.
Yes, please.
And I'm sorry, officer, this is probably going to be a difficult one to answer, but being is what's come through in the report and the officer's concerns of the sheer scale and volume of this solar farm. It's been talked about as being an industrial scale within the setting of the landscape of this historic protected landscape. And I just wondered, from the officers, in their view, what reduction would be needed of a proposal like this on this type of site for a solar farm in order for it to be acceptable? I mean, can you give us some idea as to the volume and scale of this that you're not happy with? What sort of reduction in percentage terms would be needed that you think it would be acceptable, or are we saying that no matter what size this solar farm would be, it wouldn't be acceptable? Because I'm very much of the same mind as Councillor Took and others, and Councillor Worth, that we have signed up to a climate emergency. We don't have sufficient national grid capacity, and there's got to be a new way of thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's acknowledged, isn't it, in the officer's report that there would be an acceptable solution here if it was reduced. I wouldn't really want to get into the specifics of exactly how much it would need to be reduced in terms of percentages. That's something that would have to happen between the council and the applicant and the agent. You know, and an assessment made of those revised plans in consultation with all of the other consultees. However, the applicants made the case that should this site have to be reduced in any significant way further, that it would no longer be viable for them to continue with. So that the prospect of that happening seems fairly unrealistic.
I think, Simon, that is the answer. I'm glad you brought that in, because Shane, that really has answered the question, that the applicant has said that the reduction that he's given, any further reduction, would not be viable anyway. So we wouldn't be looking at that. We are where we are with that. We've got that size that we're addressing now, and if the outcome of this means that they've got to go back to the drawing board, so be it. But their comment there is quite clear that it wouldn't be viable.
I just want confirmation within the meeting. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next here, waiting very patiently, has been Councillor Kelvin Clayton. Thank you for your patience, Kelvin.
Thank you, Chair. And just bear with me. I need to bring another document up. Okay. In one of the letters of support, Poppy Maltby, who's head of cities and regions for Regens, and I think she's also involved in Dorset LEP, suggests that the availability of low agricultural land grade, availability of electricity infrastructure that are outside OMBs are really rather few, and she suggests she encloses a map with these sites available in yellow, but it's not with her letter. I suppose my question is, in the scale of Dorset, how many suitable sites are there for solar PV arrays? Because she's suggesting this is one of the very few. Have we got any information on that?
Does anybody have the answer to that to hand?
Hi, Councillor Clayton. I mean, it's an extremely difficult question to answer. You know, the assessment of the entirety of the Dorset Council area in relation to what might constitute an acceptable solar farm site is an incredibly detailed and extensive piece of work that I don't believe exists. You know, there's land ownership issues, there's, like you said, all different types of constraints issues in terms of landscape and other matters, flooding, heritage, drainage. So the answer is I don't know at this point in time how many other sites. I know that Dorset Council have given planning permission over the last few years to, you know, a fairly significant number of solar farms, so they do exist in acceptable areas. But to the exact quantum, I don't know.
I mean, it may be something that the council needs to consider in future, but I would find it really useful to be able to judge this against the availability of other sites, and therefore to balance its importance for the delivery of renewable energy. But that's not going to help us now. So thank you.
No, I don't think it's something we could investigate further outside of the meeting, Kelvin. I do agree with you, but for future reference, certainly with the climate and ecological emergency, that sort of information is useful to have to hand for members. But so thank you for raising that one anyway.
You're on mute, Chairman.
Thank you, Shane. Alex, you said you've got another question. When question's over. So what is it have you got a point you want to make? Because I've still got other members waiting.
Are they? Have we moved on from questions onto debate?
Well, I think that one is blending into the other, as so often happens with this situation. I've got Shane wants to come back with another couple of questions, I know, and I've got Councillor Dave Bolwell on the list. So I think you ought to make your point anyway.
Okay. Right. Oh, I suppose you ought to see me just in case you want to. As I sit in front of a field of small agricultural fields. What I'm looking at I've been reading up on the sort of the planning considerations for AONB, which I know this isn't. I am aware of other solar farms in my area, if not necessarily in my ward, some of which are very substantial, but admittedly not in these small agrarian pastoral fields. But the other side of it is that because this plan indicates that they are keeping the hedge lines and they are keeping most of the standard trees, some of which are in the middle of fields, and we've seen the plan with the panels sort of dotted in and out, and some of them spaced back a fair amount from, should we say, standard trees in the middle of meadows. In fact, although it is a large area, it is effectively quite broken up. It's not 100 acres of nothing but panels, which is what is happening in some other areas. So I would be inclined to think that although this is a very beautiful wide landscape, it is still sort of chopped up. It will be broken up. It's not just a bit of screening around the edge, which is what a lot of these solar farms used to have. This is actually quite nicely broken up, and you could argue that would be no more offensive to the eye for a passerby than seeing fields of something unpleasant, like lots of stacks of shiny black bales or something. So I'm sort of slightly swaying to although it's large, it will actually fit into the sort of field pattern much more than you might think. And it's certainly, once they are in these panels, I mean, I've seen lots of photo montage, there's a few photo montages about what it would look like, and you always take those with a pinch of salt, because photo montages and photos are always taken at ground level where somebody is standing. But in fact, when you're up on a hill some distance away, like we were, you get a sort of more, almost like an aerial view. But it comes down to, we can only accept what's put in front of us. We can accept it or reject it. We can't say it would be better if it was half a mile down the road. We can't say, oh, but there's better places, because those places at the moment haven't come up, or some of them are coming up. But, this is not what we're looking at the moment. We're looking at one rather beautiful wide vale. And if it is still broken up with hedge groups and individual standard trees, some of which are quite substantial, those trees, and we still have underneath those panels, which are raised off the ground, we will have vegetation. It may not be the best vegetation in the world because it will be shaded, but it still will effectively act as a carbon sink. So we haven't lost that ability. So to say it's one or the other, I think you would get both, and it could actually be a better carbon sink because it will be undisturbed once the panels are in, compared with fields that are ploughed every year, where they are actually inverting the soil and therefore releasing carbon every year. So I am at the moment quite favourably inclined towards this application, because I do feel that we have to take it, if we say that climate change or concern about climate change has to be embedded into all our decisions, perhaps we ought to go that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Shane Bartlett, you've got a couple more questions, I believe, have you?
Thank you, Chairman. I just stick to the one question. I need to be careful how I ask it. So it's actually a question at the end of it. In the officer's report, and you and I are both veterans of the old regulatory committee, and when we start dealing with bridleways and footpaths and rights of way, there's obviously quite a bit of weight given to the enjoyment of the experience of the individual using those paths and those rights of way in terms of the landscape that surrounds them, and that you can't do anything that would harm or detract from their enjoyment in using those paths in general. So I was just wondering about the fact that within the report it talks about the harm that can be given to those rights of ways and bridleways and the views across the landscape and what could be seen, and just to how much weight as officers feel we need to give that, because I think it's 83% of Dorset we can't develop in terms of planning for house building, what have you, because of the SSIs, the areas of outstanding natural beauty, historical and heritage assets that are protected, or floodplain. So just wondered what the officer's thinking was on how much with these solar farms, how much weight is going to be given to them being a eyesore, for want of a better word, to the public when they're using those facilities across the landscape, because as I say, we have signed up to a climate change, and it seems that planning needs to catch up with that. Just have a view on that, please.
Yeah, there is a question in there somewhere, isn't there? So yeah, okay.
I come back to the officer struggling.
Hi, Councillor Bartlett. I think probably the question is about the weight, isn't it, to the protection of the enjoyment of the people on footways and bridleways, and you know, questions of weight is difficult to quantify in a particular amount, but some weight is given to that, obviously, but it's part of the consideration that forms part of the overall balance. So it's the visual change in the landscape in connection with, you know, the enjoyment of people walking on those paths. But you know, if that was the very sole reason, an area of concern, and then perhaps it wouldn't be enough to recommend refusal of the application. But in connection with the wider landscape harm and the connection with the heritage assets, that it's the overall harm that's considered to outweigh the balance. So it's just part of the overall decision-making consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is a difficult one, to be honest. Obviously, I'm glad I went out and did the site visit. It's been very helpful. But I'm coming back to a point that Councillor Shane Bartlett made earlier, and I think when he was asking about the reduction in percentages that would possibly make this application acceptable, it actually raised a large question in my mind. I mean, are we on the cusp with this one? You know, a slight reduction and the officers would have said okay. Or is anything acceptable on this site? I mean, we're talking about less than substantial harm to a water tower and a barn, and I always struggle with this. Obviously, we're talking about views, obviously visual views rather than physical harm. So, you know, what degree of visual harm is acceptable on this particular site is a question I've got in my mind. I'm slightly leaning towards accepting the proposal, which means I'll be against the one that's on the table. So, but perhaps the officer could perhaps just revisit this one again and give me an indication. You know, are we very close to that? I know the applicant's saying it can't be any smaller, but I mean, are we just talking about a small minuscule part that would have made this acceptable or not? Thanks.
Before I bring anybody in on this one, don't forget, Councillor Baldwin, we're looking at the application as it is in front of us now.
Yeah, I fully understand
to start
that,
considering
Chair,
whether it's larger or smaller. It's what is here today that we have to determine, and
I do understand that,
the outcome.
I'm trying to get to what's not quantifiable here, because as it's so finely balanced, I was just looking for some sort of direction. Are we just sort of like almost there with it? And I realise that I'm not asking for it to be made smaller, but you know, these are subjective things and they're down to interpretation. And as it's so finely balanced, I'm struggling to come down one way or the other, Chair. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure whether the officer feels that he can answer that one. Simon, I'll just defer to you for a moment because it's theoretical, and you know, we are where we are with the application.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, you're right, and I think I've probably answered this question previously in that, you know, I wouldn't, and I don't think the council would want to get into what is going to be acceptable in terms of quantum at this stage. We don't know what that reduction looks like, where the site would be reduced, what additional mitigation measures would be proposed. So it's so theoretical that I can't really get into that.
No, that's fine. I'll stop it there,
yeah,
because that's fine. Thank you. All right, Councillor Bolwell, thank you for that. Councillor Took. Phil, did you want to come in the meantime before I bring David Took in?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. It might be one that Simon needs to come back on, but just going back to the question from Councillor Borwell, I think he was talking about the impact on the heritage assets and less than substantial harm, and that being visual harm. I just wanted to say that I think Simon had said earlier that it's the setting of the listed building that is harmed, and that isn't just the visual harm. There's more to the setting of the listed building than the pure intervisibility between the assets and the proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that one up. Thank you very much. Okay. Right, David Took.
Thank you, Chair. If we look at page 8 of the report, we've got section 4 is key planning issues, which identifies that heritage assets are less than substantial harm, and the visual amenity and landscape, it'll be harmful to the setting of heritage assets and to the character. But I'm taking that is less than substantial harm because that's what it says. And now look at paragraph 202 of the NPPF, which says that where a development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including, where appropriate, securing its optimum viable use. And I think that last bit is important. As optimum viable use, presumably the solar farm far outweighs the value of category 3 being category 4 agricultural use. It strikes me that the public benefits of the solar farm in producing carbon-free electricity, and especially the biodiversity impact, all speak strongly in favour of the application. And whilst I see that there will be some harm to the views, I don't think they outweigh, to my mind, they do not outweigh the benefits of the climate mitigation and the biodiversity enhancements, planting of trees. And I am inclined to vote against the proposal, i.e. in favour of approving the application. But because we're talking about less than substantial harm, I think the balance becomes much more significant. And the balance, I think, to my mind, is tilted in favour of renewable energy. Thank you.
Okay, points made. Thank you. Shane, you come back, but I think one more time in this case, because you've had a fair crack at the whip this morning.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was just going to do my own summing up, but effectively, Councillor Took has said it all for me, really. I think that, you know, we as Dorset Council, we have signed up to a climate emergency, ecological and climate emergency, and I appreciate the status of this particular landscape and what it is. But as I already said, I think about 83% of Dorset we would struggle to build on and develop because of the various issues surrounding it. And I think I said before earlier in the meeting, it feels almost that we're in a situation where planning needs to catch up to the situation we're in. We're just at the COP26. It's already been stated in this meeting, I know full well myself because I sat on the EAP that dealt with it, that we don't have sufficient national grid capacity within this county. We can't move forward as a county in terms of our economic development, and we will have to bring in these types of facilities, these types of solar farms somewhere. I mean, I'm reminded of the fact that in springtime, often you look across the landscape. Like I can stand on Barbury Rings and look across the landscape at Barbury Rings and see fields full of polythene that look very much like a solar farm in the distance. But I'm not aware that farmers need planning permission to put those polythene down to aid the growth of what they've planted to speed up that growth. So we do have an impact on the landscape with what we're already doing, and this isn't a facility that's going to be there forevermore. I think it has a 35-year lifespan, I think I read in the report. So I too am minded to vote against the proposal that's on the table at the moment, which if I remember correctly was to go with the officer recommendation in the report, if I remember that correctly. I fully believe that we need a different mindset. I appreciate the officers' concerns over this. I appreciate the fact that if this goes to appeal, it might create problems for the council. But I think a mark has got to be laid down as to what we're going to do as Dorset Council, what we're going to do about the entry provision. And as I say, I do agree with the Councillor Took that I think looking at the MPPF document, looking at that visual amenity and landscape, what harm there is to it, the heritage assets, what harm there is to them, I think there is a greater public benefit than those aspects of any harm that is brought. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Kelvin Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, I was just going to say exactly what Councillor Took and Councillor Bartlett have just said. I think less than significant harm is most certainly, when you weigh it against the public benefits of an increase in renewable energy, it speaks for itself as far as I'm concerned. And adding to it what paragraph 152 of MPPF, that the planning system should support the transition to a low carbon future, I'm minded to propose that we actually accept this application.
Well, we have a proposal and a seconder on the table now, so really we have to take the vote on that. And
just a point of order: if that vote is lost, is it automatically accepted?
Could I have some legal advice on this, please?
Chairman, it's Phil Crowther. No, it wouldn't be automatically accepted. If the current proposal to refuse permission was lost, then you would need a further proposal and seconder, and then a vote on that other proposal.
Thank you.
You know where you are with that then, Kelvin? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else, or is that was it? Was it? Okay.
Well, it's okay for the moment, Chair.
Okay.
Let's take the vote and see what happens.
Well, I've got no more speakers here, so before I move to the vote, this is a finely balanced one, as I think we've all agreed, and those of us that were at the site visit will also agree just how beautiful the area is, and perhaps it's easy to get carried away on the beauty of something, but that part of Dorset is particularly lovely. But it isn't just about the view, as far as I could see. It's about the overall history of the landscape and how it fits in with the perception of Dorset as a whole. And I believe that that area we're looking at is one, it's very much as it would have been in medieval times. And there are various factors which are not just how it would look. And I accept the fact that the renewable energy is important, and with our climate and ecological emergency, we have to put great weight on that as a council, and I would be the first to say that is extremely important. But at the same time, we do have a duty to protect the heritage, if you like, of Dorset. And it's not just about buildings, etc. We tend to think of heritage and as assets, buildings, but you know, the countryside as a whole, and certain areas of Dorset particularly do give image is not the right word, but that is quintessentially Dorset, and I believe this area also featured in Hardy's work. Marnhole, for example, features there, and so it has lots of value historically as an area with terrific heritage value. So I think we have to take that in, bear that in mind, and weigh that against the need to provide this renewable energy, which is increasing all the time. It is very important to the community and to all of us as a whole. So I've said my piece. Now we've got a proposal. Can we have the recommendation on the screen again, please? Can we have the slide with the recommendation, just so that for clarity? I should have made a note of the slide number, Simon, shouldn't I? Okay, there we are. Thank you very much. So there's the recommendation, and we've had a proposal from Councillor Belinda Rideout to accept that, to support that, minded to support it, and that is seconded by Councillor Mary Penfold. And I will take the vote by roll call, and as ever, members, when I call your name, can you indicate that you've seen the whole presentation and listen to the debate, and then let's have your minded to decision. Right, Councillor John Worth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've listened to the debate. I've enjoyed the presentation. I've taken part in it, and I'm minded to not to support this proposal that we have before us.
Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I attended the site visit. I've listened to all of the officers' presentation. I've taken part in the debate, and I vote to refuse this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Bolwell.
Yes, Chair, I attended the site visit. I've seen the whole presentation and I've listened to the debate, and I am minded to refuse it. I'm not sure if I am. It's so difficult, this one.
Well, either you support
I do not support the proposal on the table.
Oh, okay. Councillor Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. I have been present throughout this debate and taken part in it. I went on the site visit. I was minded both ways, but at the moment I am not going to accept the recommendation on the screen. So I'll vote against the recommendation. A bit sort of double negative.
And Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I attended the site visit. I've watched the presentation. I've taken part in the debate, and I am minded to not support the recommendation.
Councillor Penfold. Councillor Penfold.
Sorry, Chairman, my sound was not on. I have been present throughout. I attended the site visit, and I am minded to support the recommendation to refuse the application.
Thank you. Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been present throughout the debate, and my mind has not changed. I still support the to refuse the application.
Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. I've been present throughout the debate. I was on the site visit. I've taken part in the debate, and I am minded not to support the current proposal to refuse this. I hope that's clear.
Yes, that is clear. Thank you very much. Okay, now that is everybody. And right, totting up the votes here. Elaine, have you managed to come to a total yet?
Yes, I have. There's 2 in support of the recommendation and 6 against the recommendation. So the recommendation's been refused.
Yeah, thank you. That matches my calculations as well. So thank you for that. Okay. Right. So that's been lost. Now we need a proposal for an alternative, please. Clayton, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, Chair. I would propose that we accept the application.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, Chair. Councillor David Took, I will second that proposal to accept the application.
Okay, well, I've got Anna Lee wants to come in, but I think I know what this is in connection with. This is about conditioning before we go to any vote. But Anna, I'll let you have say your piece, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was also to say I think we would need reasons for the proposal so that they could be minuted. And then once we're at that stage, if you were amenable, we would perhaps have a short adjournment so officers could suggest conditions in the event that members support that proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, I was going to say the piece about the conditions anyway, but if the proposer wants to give his reasons for supporting, please.
Yeah, more than happy to, Chair. The key planning issues in 4.0 of the report basically give benefits to most issues with the acceptance of landscape and heritage assets. And most of the debate seems to be on heritage assets, but the officer admitted there is less than substantial harm to the heritage assets. So in paragraph 202 of the MPPF, where there is less than substantial harm to the significance of a heritage asset, the harm has to be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. And I'm suggesting the public benefits of the proposal far outweigh those less than substantial harm. Is that okay?
Okay, that sounds reasonable to me. Thank you very much. And seconder, happy with that, David?
Yeah, pretty much what I would have said myself.
Okay. All right. So the next step in the procedure then is, before we take any vote on this, for officers will need a little time to prepare some conditions which will be brought back to the committee before we take the final vote. So we'll have to take an adjournment on this. I'll take advice from officers. How much time do they think they're likely to need to prepare conditions? Because it's time we had a short break anyway, so I'm happy to adjourn. If you can give me some indication of how long might be appropriate, please.
I think 15 minutes would be sufficient, Chair. We've already heard some conditions that members have asked to be included, so we could cover that, I think, in 15 minutes.
Fine. Would you say by midday then? It's 11:47 now, so midday, would that be pushing it too much, or?
I think that'd be okay.
Okay, members, we will adjourn the meeting now until midday today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, it's midday, everybody, so welcome back. Have we got officers there with prepared conditions, please?
Hi, Chair. Yes, we have prepared a set of conditions. Should I share my screen to?
Yes, if you would,
yeah.
please.
Okay. Okay, and can you see those okay?
Quite small print. I don't know how members feel about that. It's, I think you probably, if you can bring up the font size, that is better.
Is that better?
That is better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just run through them one at a time. So there's 12 conditions proposed in total. Number 1 would be the approved plans list for the development to be carried out in accordance with. Number 2 would be for the commencement of the development to occur within 3 years. Number 3 would be a 34-year time limit in which the equipment would then need to be removed and the land restored to its original state. Number 4 would be the scheme for that decommission and the restoration. Number 5 would be for the development to be carried out in accordance with the implementation of the construction and environmental management plan already submitted. Number 6 would be for the submission of hard and soft landscaping details to be submitted. Number 7 would be for the development to be carried out in accordance with the submitted tree and hedge protection measures. Number 8 would be for the development to be carried out in accordance with the and the implementation of a framework construction traffic management plan. Number 9 for the development to be carried out in accordance with an implementation of a landscape and ecological management plan. Number 10 to be carried out in accordance and implementation of the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy. Number 11 for the external colour of associated buildings to be agreed, retained and maintained, and number 12 for the lighting scheme to be agreed. And I think the proposal should be, Chair, for the headline conditions to be agreed, and then for some delegated powers in consultation with yourself and perhaps the Vice Chair to agree the detailed wording, which we haven't had time to do.
Right, yes, that would be acceptable, that it could be delegated to the head of planning together with myself and the Vice Chairman for final detail approval. I'm happy with that. Can I go back to our proposer, Kelvin Clayton? Are you there, Kelvin?
I'm happy with that, Chair.
You're happy with those conditions?
Yeah.
Seconder, David Took.
I've got a question on condition 3.
Okay,
which is a
fire away.
35-year limit, equipment removed and land restored, which I don't have a problem with. My assumption is that should at that time there be a further planning application to extend or replace or regenerate it, that would then be a separate matter at that time. Is that correct? So notwithstanding what we might say on condition 3, they could say, well, we want to continue this for another 10 years or rebuild it for another 35. Is that feasible?
I believe that is so, but again, would you like to clarify that, Simon?
Hi, Councillor Took and Chair. Yes, that would be possible for the applicants to apply for an extension of the use of the land at that time, and that would just be a matter for consideration at that particular point in time.
So this condition wouldn't remove that possibility from them?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. One thing is certain out of that, David, if that happens, I won't be chairing that committee.
You want to bet? It's your punishment.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we've got the proposal as laid out by Kelvin Clayton, seconded by David Took. And we'll take the same procedure going through the roll call for members to say you're minded for or against to support the proposal as detailed by Kelvin Clayton. Councillor John Worth.
Minded to support the proposal with those conditions.
Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Minded to support the proposal with those conditions, Chairman.
Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Yes, Chair, minded to support the proposal with those conditions.
Councillor Alex Brenton.
Chair, I am minded to support the proposal with the attached conditions. Thank you.
Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Yeah, minded to support, Chair, with the conditions.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Unable to support, Chairman.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Unable to support, Chairman.
And last but not least, Councillor David Took.
Support the proposal with these conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Elaine, figures, please. Hopefully we match.
Yeah, that's carried. 6 in support, 2 against.
I agree with that. 6 in support, minded 2 against. And now we need an officer to approve the minded 2 decision to firm up on that. And that today is Anna Lee.
Thank you, Chair. And I confirm that I have heard the full debate and the presentation and was present at the site visit. And this application will be taken forward in line with the committee's minded to resolution. This means the application will be approved subject to the detailed condition wording as discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that is approved, and we move on. Thank you all members and officers for your input in that. It was a very good debate, and the fact that we had the site visit was absolutely well worthwhile and helped to contribute to a very good discussion. So thank you. Okay, item number 6. This is an application for a definitive map and statement modification order to add a footpath from Sunnyside Road to Rylands Lane in Regius, Weymouth. And I think it's the presenter today is going to be Anne Brown. Are you with us, Anne? I know we're a bit out of it from time, but you are here, so that's the main thing.
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
And when you're ready, over to you.
Share my screen.
Thank you.
Why can't I share my screen? Sorry, I'm just struggling to share the screen at the moment. My screen sharing is on. And it's the pattern on the PowerPoint. No.
We've got George Dare sharing, I think, the agenda screen at the moment.
The PowerPoint hasn't came up yet on the screen. In the top right next to the leave button.
I'm already click that. Yeah, share. Okay, then click at the bottom. I'm not quite sure why I'm unable to share. It looks like somebody else is already sharing. Try sharing on the actual PowerPoint rather than the slide. So click on the, so go back to do escape, press escape. Escape. So go back to Teams. We've had this before, so share content, so share on, to do and share. So try again, share content, but this time, window 4. That one, yeah, try that one. That's it.
There we are, we got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Right, okay. Sorry about that. So my name's Anne Brown and I'm the Definitive Map Technical Officer. We're meeting today to consider an application for a definitive map and statement modification order to add a footpath from Sunnyside Road to Rylands Lane in Regius in Weymouth. The application was made firstly by Mr. R.B. Price on the 14th of September 2011 and was subsequently taken on by Ms. C. Price on the 16th of September 2019. The application is in a built-up area in Regius. If you look at the orientating map on the top right-hand corner, you can see it's a built-up area, and there's the All Saints C of E school here. The application is entirely through the grounds of the school. It begins at point A1 on Rylands Lane, where there's an entrance to the school. It proceeds in a southwesterly direction through the school grounds, across the school sports field, or along the edge of the school sports field to point A1. There's then a small diversion off the straight line around a steep bank here, next to a sports hall, to A3. And then the route returns to a straighter line, A4 to point B. At point B, the claimed route crosses the main drive to the school, and there is a zebra crossing there currently, crosses onto the opposite pavement and follows the school drive around to point B1, where there is an electronic remotely controlled security gate, and then continues on to point C, which is the boundary of the school premises, and at point C was the original gate to the school. So the application is entirely within the grounds of the school, and to address the conflict of interest arising from Dorset Council being the landowner, it's considered that the decision should be made by the Strategic Planning Committee. So this is what you're seeing now is an original route. We did receive an earlier application for a route that went more directly from A to A1 to A4 to B, and then following the same route as we're considering from this application. The old route had to be diverted in 2005 because the sports hall was built. So this building of this sports hall here involved the cutting away of a bank here, which led to the diversion of the route we saw initially. Okay, so the previous claim for the more direct route was case file T392, and we will consider that evidence at the same time today. The original case was withdrawn in 2009 because the applicant felt that if successful, the application would simply result in closure of the path on school security grounds, but the evidence remained within council hands and we need to consider it along with the evidence supplied with the newer application. If we now do a virtual site visit and have a look at the site, we're now in Rylands Lane, looking at the entrance to the school. You can see there's a wall with a fence and there's a pedestrian access with a gate across it. The gate was open when I was there. There are signs on the gate posts reading private property. This is not a public right of way. Those signs have not, we understand, have not been there throughout the time that we're considering. If we then look from point A along the application route, we can see that it's a tarmacked path running between grass verges, and further along it's covered with trees and verges either side, but it continues as a tarmac path. We're now looking from A2 towards A3. We can see the school sports hall on the left and a fairly steep bank on our left-hand side. This is where the path was diverted from the earlier application route. Looking back now from point A3 back towards A2 and A1 and the entrance to the school, you can see the steep bank now on our right hand side next to the sports hall, and you can see that steep bank is partly overgrown with brambles, which means that the original route applied for is no longer available and no longer usable. Continuing on to point B, where there's the zebra crossing across the school drive, there is a school supplied sign that directs people to Sunnyside Road and says no cycling. and on the other side of that sign there's a direction sign to Rylands Lane and no cycling. These signs were erected by the school to guide school pupils and school visitors to the appropriate exits for the school. We're now looking from point B towards point B1. So from here on, the application route runs alongside the pavement on the far side. Here we're approaching point B1, where there are the remotely controlled security gates. These security gates are relatively new. There is a pedestrian security gate, which is also remotely controlled. Again, it's quite new. And this was the original entrance to the school. This is the boundary of the school premises, with a vehicular entrance and a pedestrian entrance, and the sign on the post reads private property, no ball games, including Sundays. So we have two routes. The evidence is a little complicated because although the old route is no longer available, and the new route was not really available when the old route was being used, people who claimed use in the more recent times seemed to always to have claimed to use the new route even when the old route was in existence. I considered this was most likely to be because they had forgotten that the route had moved slightly over a period of time, and so I analysed the data with their claimed use of the new route, and also did presumed use of the old route when it was the old route that was in existence. So from the years when they said they were using it, if they said they were using a route through the school grounds, I presumed they were using the old route if it was during a time when the old route was in existence. So the direct route A to A4 is no longer available because the building of the school sports hall in 2005 resulted in the cutting away of the path to form the steep bank, and the new section of the current application route was set out and tarmacked following the building of the sports hall in 2005. If we now look at the aerial photos, this photograph was taken in 2002, and you can see the direct route as a clear path on the ground from A to A1 to A4 to B. There wasn't actually a zebra crossing marked on the school drive, but it crossed at point B and then round the pavement to B1 to C. The school sports hall wasn't in existence then. If we compare that with the aerial photograph from 2014, the school sports hall has now been built, and you can see that the new path is laid out A1, A2, A3 and 4, and the rest is as in the previous one. So we need to consider the evidence that the path is in existence and that it had public rights. I consider the documentary evidence. All the documents that I examined suggested that there was no path in existence in the area of the application route prior to the building of All Saints School in the 1950s. None of the available documents is suggestive of public rights along the application route. Therefore, the documentary evidence provides no support for the claim. If we now consider the user evidence, I'll first of all consider the use of the old route. So this, beg your pardon, just going to go back. This is the old direct route before the sports hall was built. Use of the old route prior to 2005 appears to be use as of right, and by that I mean that the use was without force, it was without secrecy, and it was without permission. However, during this time, there were only 10 people who declared they used the old route during some years of the qualifying period leading up to 2005. If I also considered people who I presume used the old route in addition to that, because they were using it at the time when the old route was laid out, that rises to 17 presumed users in total in some years. This is considered to be a low number of users given the urban situation and the claimed reasons for using the route, which people said they were getting using the route to get to the doctor's surgery, to the health centre, to shops and to the library. It's not considered that this number of users can constitute the general public in such a densely populated area. In addition, if we looked at how frequently the route was used, the route received use of less than 4 times a day on average and never more than 7 times a day on average. This is considered to be insufficient for the use to have come to the attention of the landowner, given the high number of visitors and pupils accessing the school by right. So people accessing the school, pupils and visitors to the school, their use cannot be counted as public use. And we're looking to see whether the landowner or the lessee would have been aware that other people, in addition to the legitimate users, were using the route. And I feel that between 4 and 7 times a day is not sufficient for the landowner to necessarily have been aware of that. So the number of users and the frequency of use of the old route is considered insufficient on its own to result in a deemed dedication. If we now consider the newer route, this is after the school sports hall was built in 2005. The route was available and used on foot from late 2005 to 2019. This is less than the 20-year period required for a deemed dedication under the Highways Act 1980, but we can also consider it under common law. 10 witnesses described seeing signs on the route of the new route between A and C, and these signs were certainly there following 2005. The signs were quoted as reading, "Not a right of way, but public welcome to use it." Such signs mean that use by the public was with permission. In other words, that it was use by right rather than use as of right. This is an example of the sign which was photographed by a Dorset County Council officer in 2005 during a site visit. And you can see that it's headed All Saints Church of England School. This is not a public footpath. However, you are welcome to walk via the pathway to Rylands Lane. Consequently, it's believed that public rights to use the new route A, A1, A2, A3, A4, B, B1C on foot have not been acquired because use of the route since 2005 has been with permission and the public were aware of that permission. We received landowner evidence. In response to a letter from the first applicant in 2005, the Church of England Diocese of Salisbury Board of Education indicated that the school had no intention to dedicate a right-of-way in 2005. Following consultation in 2019 for the application received in 2011, the Ambitions Academies Trust, who were then lessees, acknowledged that members of the public were using the route every few months, were being challenged, and that gates were being locked when the pupils did not need access. The Academies Trust believes that a path within the boundary of the school represents a safeguarding issue. Dorset Council Premises Commissioning Team, representing Dorset Council as owners, opposed the application. The grounds for objection were based on safeguarding concerns and their right to extinguish or divert public rights of way through school grounds under some circumstances. This might be possible under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000. Safeguarding, whilst it is an important matter, is not something that can be taken into account when deciding whether public rights have come into existence. Extinguishment and diversion under the Countryside and Rights of Way Act cannot be considered unless public rights have been established. There was additional evidence submitted by the applicant. The applicant submitted documentary evidence as well as the user evidence. None of the documentary evidence supplied by the applicant provides support for the application. It's unclear from communications whether the applicant was using the route as of right or whether use was with permission. The applicant expressed the view that rights could be acquired even when use was with permission. Public rights cannot be acquired when use is with permission. Permission to use the route can be withdrawn at any time. So if we summarise the evidence of use of the old route and evidence in support of the old route A, A1, A4, B, B1, C prior to 2005, there is no supporting documentary evidence. Use appeared to be without force, without secrecy or without permission for more than 20 years prior to 2005. So this means that rights could potentially be acquired. However, use was by insufficient different users to represent use by the public and was not sufficiently frequent at between 4 and 7 times a day for it to be brought to the attention of the landowner. Given the location and the high number of legitimate users who could access the school, this is considered insufficient for a deemed dedication. If we now consider use of the new route since 2005, there is no documentary evidence supporting the application. The use continued for less than 20 years, so it can't be considered under the Highways Act 1980, but use could still be considered under common law. Signage was displayed on the site indicating that use was with permission and users reported seeing the sign. Therefore, I conclude that rights cannot be acquired because the use was with permission. So in considering the application to add a footpath from Sunnyside to Rylands Lane, Regius, Weymouth, my recommendation is that the application to add a footpath be refused. The reason for my recommendation is that the available evidence does not, on balance, show that the claimed right-of-way subsists or is reasonably alleged to subsist. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you. That's very clear. Okay, we've got written representations now, and the officer who's going to read those is Alistair Bevan.
Do I unshare?
Hello, Alistair.
Hello, Chair.
When you're
Can
ready.
you hear and see me okay? This statement is from Claire Price, the applicant, and is in support of the application. I am requesting these words be listened and considered very carefully for this application. I have read through the summary. A lot of questions were asked, and yet I was not contacted for clarification on any of my points. My evidence comes from being a resident for most of my life. I am 39 years and 5 months. The footpath through the school was never contested until the few years before the application, which arose from the gates being locked. I refer to point 6.1, quote, the school had no intention of dedicating a right-of-way. However, there is no evidence that this was communicated to the public, close quote. The school literally locked the gates one day. The public were trying to use the route as usual, which was now suddenly locked. Living next to the footpath, the gates were not locked from 1986 through to 2011, only attempted to be locked from 2005 onwards. I spent many weekend days, the school not open at weekend, learning to ride my bike, roller skating, walking to the Fairview Park to meet friends, heading to the shops on Portland Road. This all spans over 20 years and I was never challenged when using the route. I refer to point 6.3 where the school claimed challenges were made in 2011. The access was not blocked either. I had straight access through open gates. The confusion of my evidence. I am not planning officer. I am a member of the public who is among the witnesses who provided you their information. I beg that it be considered that a lot of the people who submitted their evidence, a few are of the much older generation, and an abrupt phone call is not sufficient to take evidence from when asking further questions. I had complaint of such a phone call. Had I been asked to do so, I would have happily gathered any missing signatures from the people who happened to forget to sign their signature. Here are my points. Point 7.11. I would have appreciated consultation and not presumption on this document. To make allegation that I had doctored the document is not basis for making a definitive decision. Consultation with myself would have given information for further investigation of the official documents. Point 7.14. As above, discussion with myself on any questions to relevance would have revealed the desired evidence of my direction with this document. A very distinct memory, in fact, that when crossing the grass area, there was a raised manhole stroke drain, which has now since been removed, possibly when the new hall was built. This might not seem relevant, but it back up my use of having used the route. I in fact fell over this in the 80s, so it is very prominent memory. 7.22 and 7.23. There is confusion over this as the pathway was always used. No means ever stopped use. Users were never told use was to stop using it. No communication ever happened to tell the public to stop using. Sign I have memory of were brief signage that had decayed over years from lack of maintenance. Forgive me being confused by suddenly being confronted by a gate that suddenly appeared locked. It was a pathway always used with never any doubt over use until now. 8.2. Analysis of the evidence under Section 31 Highways Act 1980. Use of the path was never brought into question. I used the path as well as others, interruption for 20 years. Use was never of secrecy and without permission. Use must be by public at large. Please look at the Portland Road Tesco's. It is closed because of takings being down. I am positive that the closure of the footpath has contributed to this. Alternative routes not as safe as this one. So this side of Wyke could not access this to shop freely. Excuse me. Please can the police reports be requested? There has never been evidence of the public being those responsible for the alleged drugs. I can, however, confirm that the school pupils like to smoke weed at the other side of my garden fence at break times. It can be smelt. 7.31. Other submissions concern matters of convenience, desirability and security and did not contain any evidence which can be taken into consideration. Safeguarding. Students can be regularly seen climbing the locked gates at Rylands Lane. There is no safety being considered. Students have never had to climb the gates to get home until recent years while this case is ongoing. I can vouch for being a student allowed home at lunchtimes during my attendance when the gates were never locked. The current situation leaves the school open to injury claims. Student safety is definitely not being considered. 5.17. Officer comment. If use were with permission, the duration of use is no relevance. The dates when gates on the route were locked seemed to be unclear. A sign reading, quote, not a right of way, but you are welcome to walk through, unquote, would be sufficient to prevent acquisition of public rights, but the fact that the sign was only seen by one person during the time this route was laid out makes its present open to question. The sign appears in point B1 as photographed in 2005. What is there to question? That is the end of the submission, Chair. And that was the only statement.
Okay, thank you very much, Alistair. Thank you for that. Before I ask the officer response, we've now got the ward member, Councillor Brian Heatley, who wants to speak on this. So, Brian, when you're ready, would you want to come in, say your piece?
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually one of the 3 ward members.
That's one of 3, correct.
Rodwell
yes.
and Wyke, where this path is situated. Generally, I'm very enthusiastic about footpaths, and I'm keen on them having an appropriate legal status, and I'm keen on the council looking after them, because I think that they are very valuable, especially for children and older people. And so I kind of started off with a predisposition in this case to think that, well, maybe it could be a public right of way. However, I talked to my 2 fellow ward councillors. I didn't talk, it was an email discussion. And really 2 points came up, which are probably both legally inadmissible here. but they're real points. It's common sense. First of all, the security of the school site is important, and I don't think anyone can deny that. Secondly, there is another footpath that joins Rylands Lane to this part of Wyke, a little bit further down. It's at the bottom of the playing field that was on the map. It's maybe 50 metres, 100 metres further down the road. And provided it's looked after, it provides an alternative. Now, the report set out with great clarity and enormous detail the legal reasons why there is relatively thin evidence for the subsistence of a public right-of-way here. And I think we three of us all think it would be good if you were to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Thank you for that. Okay, Anne, is there anything you'd like to respond to from what we've heard there?
I would like to make a response to the applicant's submission, please.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, please.
I will just summarise. The applicant claimed that she was not contacted for clarification on any of her points, but Ms Price was contacted on many occasions to clarify her evidence and to explain to her the type of evidence which could be considered. She then went on to refer to paragraph 6.1 of my report and saying that about the gates being suddenly locked. That was considered in the report, and it's been discussed as an example of the public's use of the route being brought into question and preventing their use. She describes her use of the path and that access was always open, but my point in paragraph 6.3 was that even if the gates were only locked occasionally, this still represents a challenge to the public use of the route. During the building of the sports hall in 2005, the claimed route was obstructed and unavailable for some considerable time, and that means that the use of the public the right of the public to use the route was challenged at that time. Use with pedal cycles was also discussed within the report. The applicant says she received a complaint from a third party that phone calls were made that were abrupt and that her offer to volunteer to help contact witnesses was not taken up. All communications with witnesses were polite and respectful. To pass the names and contact details of individual witnesses to the applicant would have been in contravention of GDPR, so we contacted all the witnesses ourselves where we could. The applicant said she would have appreciated consultation, not a presumption, on some of the documentary evidence she'd supplied, and that an allegation had been made that she'd doctored the document. There is no allegation in my report that the applicant had doctored the evidence submitted. However, it was important to point out that some of the evidence submitted had been changed at some point in its past and could not therefore be interpreted accurately. Instead, the original document was obtained from the Dorset History Centre and is discussed in the documentary evidence section of the report. In reference to paragraph 7.14 of my report, the applicant discusses the relevance of a document to her, but paragraph 7.14 relates to the relevance or otherwise of the documentary evidence submitted, not to evidence of use. The applicant discusses her use of the path and the sudden locking of the gate with reference to my paragraph 7.22 and 7.23. These two paragraphs were discussing whether use was with permission rather than whether the use actually took place. Other witnesses reported gates being locked occasionally from as early as 2010. The applicant discusses paragraph 8.2. In this paragraph, the evidence submitted suggests that the path was indeed used without force, without secrecy and without permission prior to 2005, which is in agreement with the applicant. However, the level of use which was reported to us and therefore could be considered in the report was by a small number of people and of a low frequency, despite the fact that the evidence had been collected relatively soon after the use had taken place by the first applicant. The report establishes that use during the years from 2005 onwards was used with permission and could not result in acquisition of public rights. The applicant requests ability to view the police reports about the drug use. This was not followed up by Dorset Council because reports of drug-related incidents cannot be considered in deciding if public rights of way have come into being. The applicant asks that safeguarding be considered, and safety and safeguarding, whilst they are important, cannot be considered in deciding this case. And the final discussion of paragraph 5.17, the applicant asks what's the question relating to the sign that appears at point B1 as photographed in 2005. This paragraph 5.17 was discussing whether the one report we received that the sign was in evidence prior to 2005, we were trying to establish whether that one report that the sign was there earlier could suggest that use during the earlier time period was used with permission, but because only one witness reported that, we decided that should not be considered. Thank you, Chair.
And very detailed responses, and thank you very much for that clarification there. Before I go on, I've had a request from one of the other ward councillors, Councillor Kate Well, if she can have a quick word. Well, I'm sorry, Kate, the answer is no. The time for speakers has passed, and I think Councillor Heatley, sorry, when he made his representation, did make it quite clear that he'd been in consultation with the other ward members. Therefore, he was presenting on behalf of the three of you. So I'm awfully sorry, but that's the answer for you. But you're welcome to stay and obviously hear the rest of the proceedings. Thank you. Okay, first person on my list here is David Took.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to get too technical on this, but I'm a little confused. The paragraph 516 in the report, there is a sign described as being prior to 2005, which is, I think, identical to the one we had a picture of from 2005. The officer comment is saying that that sign would be sufficient to prevent acquisition of public rights. Although surely that the erection of that sign would be the trigger point from which you then look back 20 years. Am I not right on that? Rather than it just being there. Otherwise, you've got a situation where if you want to prevent access to your property on a right of way that would otherwise be lawfully established, you simply put up a sign and hope people ignore it for a few years.
That's absolutely correct. But there was only one witness who said that they thought the sign appeared slightly prior to the building of the sports hall, but it couldn't be established exactly when that date was, and there was only one witness who said that. All the others thought the sign had appeared after the school sports hall had been built. So we decided not to give too much weight to that. And as 2005 was already a challenge to use because the route was blocked off when the sports hall was built, shortly before wouldn't have made an awful lot of difference to that 20-year period.
Okay, it wasn't clear exactly how prior. It was prior.
Exactly.
Okay.
We couldn't establish how prior was either, except it was shortly prior. So we didn't consider that as a significant aspect.
Okay, I've got one more question, if I may, Chair.
Yes. Okay.
In one of the other things that's made quite a bit of in the report is that there's not many people use the path. So, you know, a few, but not a lot. And in context of an urban environment, you felt it should be more. What numbers would we be looking at? What numbers constitute sufficient? Is it 1, 2, 10, 100?
There is no recommended limit because it does depend on the location. But this is a very built up location, and the people that did use it said it was essential to get to the shops, the doctors, the library, the health centre. And in such a built up area, I would have expected there to be more than the 10 claimed users or 17, including the presumed users. If that route was so important to get to all of those important community areas, I would have expected a lot more people to be using it if it was used by the general public.
So what's the catchment for the people wanting to walk through to get to those local services? Say it's an urban environment, but an urban environment can have 20 or 30 houses where that would be a convenient route, and many more where there are other routes. Is yes, that a consideration?
There are other routes. There's the footpath that was mentioned that runs slightly to the south that also comes off Rylands Lane. The people who were using the application route said that footpath was not suitable because it was narrow, it was overgrown, and it was had a lot of dog waste on it. The people that used the application route also said that the road to the north was not suitable because there was a lot of heavy traffic and it wasn't really safe. So the users of the application route were suggesting that the alternatives weren't suitable at all. So I would have expected an awful lot more of the residents of the area to be using the application route, given that the alternatives were apparently not suitable.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Belinda Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question for Anne. Just clarity, really. Prior to 2005, of the declared and presumed users of the route, I think you said there were 17. What were they using that route for? There were no school users there that went on then to do some shopping or something.
They said that they were using it to go to the shops, to the doctors, to the health centre and to the library.
Right. Okay.
We excluded people who were just going to the school.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Does that answer that for you? Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. No. So, well, I can understand the various complications on this. Can I ask one, please, as chairman, my prerogative? Is it having sat on the regulatory committee in the old DCC days, I can't recall a case where we've had a footpath challenge such as this through a school. I mean, I don't think it's a very common situation that one would expect to find. Would I be right in saying, as historically?
There are paths through schools. I haven't dealt with a new application for a path through a school. I think in recent years most schools have worried a lot about security and have taken steps to prevent public access through the school. So I suspect, yes, there will be very few of these coming up now because most schools are preventing public access. But many years ago, there were schools that allowed public access and some schools were built over rights of way, and those rights of way are still in existence. So it's not unheard of to have rights of way through schools.
No, fair enough, but it just seemed an unusual sort of thing to happen. And I think your point was probably well made about determining the quantity of people using it when you've got so many, such a mixture of people going backwards and forwards anyway, who are connected with the school. So to be able to single out people who are actually going on their way to Tesco or the doctor's surgery or whatever would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, under those circumstances. And you did make the point, I think, as well, quite clearly that security and obviously safeguarding are not material issues to this sort of application. I think we have to bear that in mind too. Okay, I've got Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Brown, as an officer, for your report. It's a really good report. And as always with these types of what you see, as you say, Chairman, when we were sat on regulatory, these types of reports that come before us are often very complicated. And I think one of the issues of this being the signposting that's been on the site. I mean, I think it's pretty conclusive in terms of the various maps that you've looked at. In terms of the path across this site, it was very late in the day before a path did appear. And then reading it 5.33, a sign reading, "This is not a public footpath, however you are welcome to walk via the pathway," was seen and photographed by a Dorset County Council officer in 2005, which I think is pretty significant. And when that first application was received, such signs would be effective in granting permission for the public to use the route, and as such would prevent acquisition of public rights. This would also bring the public use of the route into question. So the fact that the path, as I understand it, would have been given the by right, meaning that the permission was given for the public to use it, but the public have no actual rights over it, then I think for me, I'm going to be minded to support the recommendation that's in the report that's before us, because it would appear to me that the public don't have a right to use this path. They used it with permission, and it seemed to me that, as I say, in 5.33, the evidential sign was there. Would that be a fair assessment?
Is that a proposal, Shane?
After I've heard the officer, if that's a fair assessment, if I understood it correctly, then I'll go on to that, Chairman.
That was my assessment in brief, yes. For the new route, certainly.
Yeah, thank you. So while I see you've got others in the chat bar, Chairman, to speak, then I am happy to make that as a proposal to go with the officer recommendation as laid out in the report.
Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Bartlett's proposal, please?
Happy to second, Chairman. That was what my
Vice Chairman.
RTS.
Yes, that's what your RTS is for. Okay, okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. Before we go to the vote, Councillor Rideout, you said you want to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's all just been said by the previous two speakers. I do believe the school is an important factor in here, maybe not material consideration. And there is an alternative footpath, as we've heard from the local councillor. So I'm in support of the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. No more speakers. So we'll now move to the vote. And there'll be one member less because Councillor Jesperson had to leave the meeting for another meeting at 12:30. Councillor John Worth.
Yeah, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation as a minded to decision.
And could you just confirm that you've seen the presentation and listened to the debate, please, throughout the process?
I've seen the presentation and listened to the debate, and I'm minded to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I've listened to the officer's report and I've taken part in the debate, and I'm minded to support the officer's recommendation report. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave Bolwell.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I've seen the whole presentation, I've listened to the debate, and I'm minded to support.
Alex Brenton.
Yes, Chair, I have listened to the debate and I am happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Cool. Kelvin Clayton.
Yeah, I've watched the presentation, listened to the debate and support the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Jean Dunseith.
I have seen the presentation and I've listened to the debate, and I am minded to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Mike Dyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been present throughout, listened to the debate, seen the presentations, and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Mary Penfold.
Seen the presentation and listened to the debate, Chairman. Minded to support.
Thank you. Belinda Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been present throughout. I'm minded to support. Thank you.
And David Took.
Thank you, Chairman. I've been present throughout, listened to the debate, watched the presentation, and I am minded to support the recommendation.
Thank you very much, members. Well, don't need much maths on that one. I make that unanimous. Elaine, do you agree with me?
Yes, I do agree.
So that's a unanimous decision to support the recommendation. the matter is resolved, and the decision minded to has got to be confirmed by Hilary Jordan. Are you there, Hilary?
I am, yes, thank you, Chairman. And I can confirm that I have seen the presentation and listened to the whole of the debate, and the application would be determined in line with the committee's minded to decision.
Thank you very much. Moving on, item 7, urgent items. There are no urgent items of business. And item 8, exempt business. I'm pleased to say there is no exempt business. So on that note, at 12:55, just to thank all members and officers and everyone involved in this right the way through the process for all these applications, for the work done to get it to the screen and the meeting today. Thank you all very, very much indeed. So at 12:55, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all.